is a topic that has been in the mouth of so many CEOs, especially since 4 years. And the thing is that research suggests that CEOs are afraid of uncertainty. There was this famous study in 2019 made by Harvard Business Review that found that CEOs are more likely to avoid making decisions when they are faced with uncertainty, even if those decisions could have a significant impact on the company's success. There was, from the psychological perspective, there was a study in the Journal of Organizational Behavior and Human Decision Processes that found that CEOs are more likely to make impulsive decisions when they are feeling uncertain. Well, we are living at times with a lot of uncertainty, where there is changes in technology, changes on human behaviors that are quite important. And if companies want to remain disruptive, they need to adapt and embrace. I needed to have someone who is considered as the specialist in the management of uncertainty. And my guest today is Alec Corthay, who is a doctor of management, and he has been working with different academic organizations like Central and Mines Paris Engineering School. He has been working for more than 20 years in advisory roles with Ernst & Young and Segos, and he is a former internal auditor. Well, these two things work together. So we are talking about someone who knows about how to put controls in place, and at the same time is trying to disrupt with his model how we manage uncertainty. Alec is also the founder and CEO of a company called Zera, focused on the management of uncertainty and how to help organizations work better and thrive in moments of uncertainty. Alec, it is such a pleasure because we know each other personally, and we have been following up on each other about how we are progressing in different areas. And finally, I have the opportunity to discuss about you and what you do. Alec, how did you end up moving out from a work that was more into the control of the risk into something that gives a little bit an opportunity for organizations to disrupt and create innovation?
Oh, hello, Ivan. It's good to be with you. Thank you. Well, it's a great question. It's perhaps the reason why I moved a little bit away from the world of risk is that I was feeling uncomfortable with the current way of addressing risk. I've been in situations where I've seen people cry, or as part of my work, I've people have been fired as well, and this discomfort basically led me to inquire about the nature of organization, the nature of work, and ultimately that led me to the question of uncertainty.
So if I understand correctly, you have been studying from different perspectives. So from the socioeconomical side to the psychological side, how uncertainty is affecting the individual and the organization. Is that right?
That's correct. Even though, my background is in organization and management, I'm less of a psychologist. I understand a little bit about the psychology of uncertainty, and you mentioned a study I was not aware of, so maybe you can give me the reference later. I'll do some more studying, but yeah, I've tried to approach the topic of uncertainty from both the say executive point of view as well as from the employee point of view. Now, I need to do one thing that is important to start with, is that there are different. I need to say that there are different ways to talk about uncertainty. There's no agreement on uncertainty. For our discussion, I choose to define uncertainty as the fact of not knowing. So facing uncertainty is basically facing the unknown.
But Alec, so is it like more of a feeling or is it factual? The perception that we have about uncertainty, is it more like we feel like we don't know and there might be facts that we choose not to look at? Or is it really a factual that when we feel uncertain about the future, it is it is our reality?
It's kind of a tricky question you ask, but because I need to clarify now. There are different things you may not know. You may not know facts. For example, you ignore what's the market share of your competitor. When you don't know facts, you can basically make a research, a market analysis, and you will discover facts. That's the one thing that is perhaps the most familiar with executives or managers. But there are all other things that you may not know. For example, you may not know how your employees will react or respond to a decision. Now, you may feel that you don't know what their future reaction will be, but it's not. It's much more than a feeling. It's how should I put that? It is for certain that you don't know for certain how they will react.
Indeed.
So it's a limitation or a boundary to what you actually know. At a certain point in time. You just don't know how they will react.
Coming back to the core, and thank you for clarifying this definition about uncertainty, because that makes us really understand, have the same level of discussion. How can corporations, in fact, shift their culture from one of risk aversion to one of calculated risk taking? There is all of the companies, not all, but let's say a good 70% of companies are ongoing a transformation. And in this transformation, that means also an implication in terms of the beliefs and behaviors of corporation, which is defined as culture. So can we really build a culture where we move from this risk aversion, we are cautious, to a little bit more of risk taking?
That's a great and tricky question.
Again,
I need to do a little bit of. We need to work around language here, because the way that we define risk. Risk is generally defined as a negative event or an event with negative consequences. The way we define risk in itself suggests that risk is something you want to avoid. It has negative consequences. You don't want risk. And so I guess in order to move towards a culture of calculated risk taking, to use your words, I believe the first step is to make a distinction between risk and uncertainty. Risk is an event that you want to avoid. Uncertainty is the fact of not knowing, as I define it. It's a very ordinary experience. Every day there are many things we don't know. So the first step is to make the distinction. The second step, I believe, is to lead by examples, which means you need leaders who are comfortable with the fact of not knowing, and who actually may say, in this situation, hey guys, I don't know, or I am not sure. And perhaps that leads to a conversation. I don't know, what do you guys say, or how do you look at things from your perspective? So that would be the two main steps.
Do you have the impression that leaders are becoming more comfortable with this uncertainty? Can leaders accept, like, I still remember back in my days, my bosses wanted to calculate the ROI of a lot of things who were impossible. So this is where the time where, in order to cover up for the need of uncertainty, we start bullshitting, creating models where there is no proof of whatsoever if it's right or not. Are leaders becoming a little bit more comfortable with asking random analytical questions that waste time instead of saying this is a calculated risk? If it happens, if it is bad, then it is okay because we lose, I don't know, 1% of the budget, but this is okay.
Are leaders, your question was, are leaders more comfortable today with
Yes.
taking calculated risks
Yes.
than they were before? I don't know about that, but there's a phenomenon which I called the logic of risk. Leaders follow what I call a logic of risk and not good. I would argue that if you follow a logic of uncertainty, by definition, you assume that the future is not knowable. You cannot predict the future. So, say, if we're talking about investments, innovations, for example, or big changes, transformations, it should be taken for granted that the future is unknowable. So, what do? You start with small bets, small experiments, basically following a logic that some people call design thinking. You run experiments, and that's the only way you can go about this. Now you also want to make sure you get people on board, recalling that you cannot predict their reaction. You cannot know in advance if people will participate or get involved, and that's perhaps one of the key levers, if you want, or factors of uncertainty today. You can
Alec, from the individual himself, do you feel that there is today tools in order to increase their capacity for agility? Like you were mentioning, design thinking is a process that helps a little bit reduce the risk and maybe move forward despite not knowing everything. Is there real ways for people to train themselves to increase their capacity for agility?
That's a good question. You were talking about self-help, right?
Yes, exactly.
Well, I'm in the process of writing a book, if you want, on the topic, because I think some tools exist. We're talking about creativity tools, for example, but I also think something is missing around what I call asking good questions, because a defining skill when you want to address uncertainty and move forward is the skill of asking good questions, and I find this quite. But there's not a lot of resources on this.
When you are saying good questions, is it self-awareness questions?
No. Or in part, yeah, self-awareness is important. For example, you need to be clear. Say you are an entrepreneur or entrepreneurial and you want to bring change in your organization. You need to have a sense of vision. You need to somehow be clear on your intentions. That would, I guess, be relate to self-awareness. But you also need to know what you don't know.
Yeah.
For example, at some point you will need to create a value proposition, and you will need to talk to the right person in your organization in order for that person to become a sponsor. Well, and in that example, for example, you to begin with. You don't know who you need to, at the beginning of the process. You don't know who you need to be talking to. You don't know about their interests or their potential needs. There's a lot of things that remain unclear, and that you'll need to work on in order to have a relevant value proposition and to be able to basically persuade a sponsor.
But I like this idea that the starting point starts with asking yourself the right type of questions, and maybe being quite objective about judging yourself. Like, for instance, if you ask Ivan 10 years ago when he was in corporate, do you have high emotional intelligence? I would tell you, yes, I will talk to you about books that I have read. But was I really intentional on the design of my behaviors towards to empathize with my team? No. The reality was that I sucked. And I didn't know that back then. Only afterwards, I started getting to judge myself in a more critical way, to understand that despite my knowledge, I wasn't using it. That means that I didn't have it. But back then, I believed I had it. Now, if we start from the individual where he's practicing agility, there is many tools available at the individual level in order to move forward. You mentioned that it starts with good questions and knowledge, self-awareness about themselves. Is it possible to create virality across the organization so that the organization starts embracing uncertainty or agility and make it a culture?
That's a good question. Please, Ivan, can you define virality? I'm not sure I use it in the same way as you do.
Yeah, I have a tendency to invent words, but in that context, virality means that people feel like intrinsically motivated to pass it on. Like, it's contagious, that I see people having a certain behavior, and I start miming this behavior. I start having role modeling from peers, people around me, because if it is working for them, why wouldn't it work for me? So virality, that means that without an external incentive, I feel enticed to do it.
So the question was, is it possible to create virality around,
Yeah.
what I call the logic of uncertainty and embracing uncertainty, and yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I believe it largely depends on leadership, and I'm a strong believer in leadership by example. Because let me give you a context that can be tricky. Imagine you are in a team meeting with your boss, and all of a sudden, your boss is making a presentation about a goal, and you have a few doubts. You're not sure. So you have two options. First option is you don't say anything. You don't share your doubts. That's what most people do.
Indeed.
It's better not to challenge challenge your boss. Then but there's somebody, then perhaps a newcomer in the firm, a young guy, a young woman, and he might raise his hand or her hand and ask about his question or his doubt. Now comes the defining moment. What will be the reaction of the leader when his presentation or argumentation is challenged by a doubt? Will he embrace the doubt or the uncertainty and perhaps say, thank you for, sharing your doubt, your reservation? I had not thought about this. This is a new angle, and perhaps, well, take it a step further. Or will he slam or humiliate the question, the person raising the doubt? So I hope it's a good example, but that's, it suggests leadership, the role of leaders and people in position of authority is important in that process of virality that you mentioned.
Mm. So it seems to me that what I understand from what you say is that change towards a more agile organization, a culture of agility, cannot happen with behaviors that are first mapped by the guys up there, right? If these
Not
guys,
exclusively, of
hmm,
course, but yeah.
but somehow it starts because imagine, Alec, we are in at work, we are in maybe in survival mode. We feel more comfortable miming things that have worked for the people up there because they have survived many years and they have made it to the top. So we feel like, despite of whatever is written across the websites of the company or what is being said, what counts is what the big boss does, and then we try to mime these behaviors because that's what is having success, and we want to be protected somehow. It is so important, this cultural aspect. Uh, by the way, Alec, I get interested especially about the work that you are doing with many organizations. By the way, in your website, I found that it was impressive. Like there was more than 100 organizations that you have been working with. So in order to help them manage uncertainty, what are the usual tools that you work with? How do you work with these organizations?
Uh, Yeah, I mean the 100 organizations that you mentioned. I've mostly been involved as a facilitator, right? As a
Mhm.
trainer.
Yep.
It's my job. I help people change their mindset and perhaps their behaviors.
Mm.
That's what I do as an educator or trainer. And what are some tools that I use? It's like I, I like to use cases or practical examples.
Mm.
And, I mean, I'm talking about pedagogy here, but, it's like the moment people are in a situation that they are somehow familiar with, I mean, I can start asking questions, and very rapidly people realize that they know or they understand much less than they actually believe they do.
Mm.
So I can trigger, if you want, a breakdown, some kind of breakdown, a realization that, well, at the end of the day, I know very little, and this is very you get a sense of freedom from that, because there's a lot of pressure having to pretend that you know or that you have things under control,
Mm.
when in fact this is not the case, right? uh, so
And
I work with, you know people in different roles, sometimes executives, and we have like a chat around uncertainty and the logic of uncertainty. Sometimes I work with people like more in middle management, and they want to be equipped, say for example, to manage risk. And I show them the standard method of managing risk, and then I start asking questions. And at the end of the day, they realize, well, we can manage risk, but every tool you use has limitation. And it's not because you have great tools to manage risk that you will have any control over uncertainty, because at the end of the day, uncertainty is by definition something you cannot control.
Alec, I remember that in a previous private conversation, you mentioned to me that you part of the services that you are delivering to organizations are based on some of the research that you conducted. And I would like to understand a little bit more, how do you use this research applied to the real case scenarios of corporations? How are you using it today?
All right. Well, one population that have been instructing is internal auditors. The job of an auditor is to take a picture of an organization, a snapshot, a picture, to say, what works, what doesn't work. A standard way of doing audit is to assess a process, and the good and the bad side of the process. But if you assume, as I do, that the main source of uncertainty is relational, and by that I mean there's a lot of uncertainty around the people that operate the process. Maybe their communication is not so flawless. Maybe when there is an error, they hide the error, or they communicate the error 6 months from now. Or maybe when there is an error or a problem, they blame one another. And this, causes a breakdown of the process. So what I do, for example, and that's an outcome of my research, is I've created a map that helps measure the relational quality of the people involved in a process. By that, I mean I can, in a way, quantify the quality of conversations and relationships around, a certain group of people. And I can basically predict, based on the level of communication, the degree to which these people will be able to address risks and unpredicted problems in a flawless manner.
Oh, that became a little bit of science fiction for me. So do you quantify also because in order to solve a complex problem that is unpredictable, you need to wait in not only the level of how much they act as a cohort, but also the type of skills that everybody has, because they're kind of protecting around, they become the protection against the risk, right?
Very good. Yeah. You need two things. You need the will and the skill to cooperate. The hardest is the will.
Yes.
And that's the role of leadership. A leader is somebody who creates or fosters the will to cooperate. A leader and a trainer is somebody who, increases the skill to cooperate so as to address collectively unexpected problems. This is what's missing today.
Alec, totally. And on top, I must say that you awoke the nerd in me. So it is it sounds crazy that you have been able to quantify a model of something that is, in principle, qualitative. When you don't know enough about the topic, you see it as qualitative, but you have been able to quantify it. So that's quite nice. Now, talking a little bit more about, so we are talking about the future assessment of risk. Now technology has been like a key driver of a lot of changes that are happening in organization, in terms of processes, in terms of even the way we learn. Do you have the feeling that the more we are able to use, I don't know, hardcore data analytics, predictive modeling, it will help organizations to anticipate and respond to potential risk or challenges?
Well, I have it's a great question. Yeah, everybody talks about big data, artificial intelligence. I have strong reservations about data analytics when it comes to the future, and when it comes to predicting uncertainty, because by definition the future is unknowable, and you cannot use data which is basically from the past to predict something, a future event. So, uh, you know, technology is the use of technology to anticipate risk or uncertainty is, I believe, a very limited use in most contexts, except perhaps when you look at processes that are data driven, like accounting.
Mhm.
All right. When you have a lot of data and you have a process that basically transforms data into another data, say a reporting or an, accounting statement, then yeah, perhaps you can use data analytics to anticipate problems
Uh,
in the
so
financial statements.
what would you say would be in the next 5 years would be
But
the
I mean, let me give you an
yes.
example. Yeah, one key issue today is to improve the reliability of a company's interactions with their suppliers, right? Improve the reliability of a supply chain. Ideally, you want your supplier to be you want to create a relationship of trust with your suppliers, so that when a problem occurs at your supplier, they decide, to call you and say, "Hey, Ivan, I have an issue. I won't be able to deliver on time, but I want to know as fast as possible, and let's talk to find the best mitigation strategy." You know?
Mm.
If you consider this example, I don't believe that data or having data on your supplier will help, address the problem. You need a relationship, you need a communication flow. You need people who trust one another and who are willing to solve problems without assigning blame. That's the future.
In fact, kind of you have answered the question that I had in my mind, because I was going to ask you, what do you think is going to be the major contributor to managing uncertainty in the next 5 years? Is it going to be behavioral science, the understanding of psychology, how the brain functions in order to manage risk? Is it going to be technology, or is it going to be the meta skills that you have mentioned? Exactly that, the ones that is going to help us build trust, the human skills that make that we are more collaborative, is out of the three. So I have the impression that you answer, or do you want to say more about this, any of the three?
Well, I'm happy to talk at any time, but if it's clear for you, then I'd better not say anything more.
Okay. So let's do the this exercise that you have a magic wand and you are named CEO of Fortune 500 company. What are the key questions that you would ask yourself becoming the CEO in order to know that this company has the right balance between control and agility? What are the type of information that you are going to be looking for?
Well, that's a good question. I don't know that I would ever want to be a CEO, right? In a way, I don't like having too much responsibility. To be honest with you, but perhaps one day I can help a CEO, or in that situation with that kind of question. The first issue I would raise is not about the kind of question that I would have, but about the kind of method I would follow to answer the question. And I would basically say the CEO, let's go together on the field.
Mm.
We'll go on the field. We'll talk to plant managers, say if you are in the industry, and perhaps with the CEO and the two of us will go to one of the local managers in the plant, and we'll have and I will ask the local manager, can you tell me about an error or a mistake or an issue, a big issue that happened in your department recently? And then I will remain silent and look at his, behavior, his face, his eyes, and look at the kind of response he's willing to share, in the presence of the big CEO. Is it culturally okay to share about mistakes or doubts or unknowns in the presence of a big CEO, or are people, afraid of doing so? Agility begins in, I believe, in being clear on your goals, but also in being comfortable with uncertainty and asking the relevant questions. Most companies today are not so comfortable with uncertainty, and they don't know about the logic of uncertainty.
You have astonished me, because from one side, my expectation is, okay, Alec, he's a researcher, he has been professor in several universities, so he's going to give me like the big ass model theory. And you decided to go for the approach, let's go and test in the market. So a real entrepreneurial mindset, just go and touch it on your own. I mean, it's an experiment. It's in order to validate assumptions, and it has to be directed and on the spot. Thank you, Alec, because it was unexpected for me the way you answered this question. Alec, we are reaching the end of this episode about managing uncertainty, not only living but thriving in uncertainty in corporations. And thank you very much for making the time for us. In case the audience of the Growth Hacking Culture podcast wants to reach you out to ask more questions, to get to know finally how it works, this modeling uncertainty, how can they reach you out, Alec?
Well, thanks, Ivan. I have a website. It's called zerra.com, zerra.com. But the best way to reach me at this point is on my LinkedIn profile. My name is Alec Corthay, and then we'll take the conversation from there. I'm in part a consultant, but I'm basically a curious guy who happens to be interested in companies, organization, and I believe I love people, or I try to love people, and I'm welcoming every question, and if I can help someone, I'll be glad doing it.
Thank you very much, Alec. Lovely to have you today, and lovely to have so many insights and astonishing responses. Thank you, Alex. Have a great day.
My pleasure, Ivan. Talk to you soon.